Job instability is one of the top things that cause people anxiety. It's like the second level of Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
I'm Dr. Joey Fawcett, host of the Work Positive podcast, here to help you do one thing today that creates a positive work culture so you grow people and profits. Well, we've all heard the SHRM statistic about how, 57% of persons who leave a job do so because of a bad boss. But have you ever thought about the ripple effect that bad leader has on the people who stay? And how that bad leader poisons the work culture one drop at a time? And how over time the poison accumulates in the culture and kills the company? Well, my guest on this episode of the Work Positive podcast wrote One Drop of Poison: How One Bad Leader Can Slowly Kill Your Company, which was selected as one of the top 5 books to read about principled leadership by CEO World Magazine. He's a leadership expert, executive coach, team performance coach, and he's the founder of Motivated Outcomes, an organization devoted to improving performance and engagement in today's organizations through better leadership and healthier company cultures. So what do you say, Work Positive Nation? Let's build a healthier company culture right now and discover the antidote to this one bad leader's poison on this episode of the Work Positive podcast. Work Positive Nation, help me welcome to this episode of the Work Positive podcast, my friend, soon to be yours, Shawn Limsom. Shawn, welcome to the Work Positive podcast, my friend.
Thanks, Dr. Joey. It's nice to be here.
Yeah, so, man, I got to tell you right off the bat, being an author myself, I'm always... It's kind of like I collect book titles, catchy ones. Yours is awesome, man. I gotta
Thank you.
One Drop of Poison. So when people find out Shawn Limsom wrote a book called One Drop of Poison, what kind of reaction do you get from them?
Well, usually they'll tell me a story about a toxic leader they had. I mean, it's a pretty relatable experience to have been at a company that you really enjoyed, where you're like, pinch me, I can't believe I'm being paid to do this. And then all of a sudden something changes, right? A leader 1 level or 2 levels above you gets hired on, and things just immediately start to get dark. You can just feel it. And before you know it, you hate your job and you're being laid off, or you leave, or, nobody wants to be there. It's a very common story.
Yeah, cue the music from like a horror flick or something.
Right.
Tell something ominous is about to happen. The wind starts blowing and
Yep.
So, yeah, you really can't. I mean, how many times have we all heard that? Well, I work at the Acme Corporation, and it was a great place to work until insert new boss here, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So I'm just going on a limb here, Shawn Limsom. You must know that of which you write. Who was your bad boss? Don't call a name, but just tell us.
Right, of course. No, I've had many, actually. Lots of
Oh, congratulations! You collect
yeah.
bad bosses.
It's one of the interesting parts about me, I think, and what makes my book interesting anyway, I think, is that I have a kind of a hobbyist interest in human psychology. I've always had that since I was younger. And that means that when I had a bad boss, I didn't just label it as I have a bad boss. I tried to figure out why that person was a bad boss. What was it about them? What aspect of their childhood or whatever? I don't know. I was trying to figure it out. What is it? And that's kind of how I came up with the 10 archetypes that you can read about in my book of toxic leadership, because there's not a single kind of bad leader. And I also want to be clear that when I say toxic leader, this is a really good, important place for us to lay a line down. Okay. When I say toxic leader, I don't mean the worst boss you've ever had.
All right.
Because that would feel a little like, I'm sure that the worst boss you ever had was a toxic leader, but I'd like to broaden it a little bit and say that toxic leadership is something, no toxic leader is waking up that day thinking, how can I destroy my teams today? They aren't plotting to do that. They're actually trying to do what they think is the right thing. They're operating inside of a culture that has got constraints, that has, incentives, probably really bad incentives. And they've learned the wrong thing about leadership, and they're applying that thing to their employees. So even listeners of this show who are leaders, could be toxic and not realize it. So I just want to be clear that I want to open you up to the idea that you could be being toxic without being a terrible person. It's not about your intention, you know.
Yeah. Oh, exactly. And that goes to the whole heart of the matter, which is self-awareness, right?
Yes.
Yeah. How well do you know yourself and know your leadership? Because when you get into leadership, any foibles in your personality or anything that's unresolved or whatever, man, it gets magnified and shows up front and center, right?
Yeah. And are you measuring the right things outside of you so that you would spot it if you were blind to it, right? We all have blind spots. Like I said, some leaders who are toxic think they're the most amazing leaders ever. And it is because somebody above them is rewarding a behavior that is what they want to see, but is not benefiting the people that work for that leader. So it's that I'm trying to help people make both happy, right? How do I help my leader get what they want while also leading people who want to follow me? Because that's what a leader is. A leader has followers, right? People who want to follow you. Yeah.
That's such an interesting dichotomy, that the person above them may be rewarding some behavior while tolerating others. Typically, I see that spinning out as they're producing a lot of revenue for the company.
Yes.
Therefore, I'll tolerate the fact that he or she's not going to win any popularity contest.
You're nailing it. And this is actually one of the problems that we're having right now in corporate America. We are setting. We can have a leader who, for example, one of my archetypes is called the peacock. I'll just use this as an example.
I love peacock.
Yeah, the peacock is somebody that like spreads their feathers and looks fantastic for their leader, always going to their leader with all the wins and all of the great things they've done, usually in great PowerPoint decks and fantastic things.
It makes a lot of noise, man.
Yeah, but nobody wants to work for them. When they turn around to their teams, they take terrible care of their teams, but they're always managing up, okay? Now, the peacock only works if your leader rewards that behavior. So, for example, if your leader just says, yeah, you're checking the boxes, you did these great 3 things, fantastic, then that leader's off the hook. That peacock can go ahead and continue to operate that way. But if that leader the peacock's leader were to say to them, it's nice that you got us these wins, but your engagement scores are some of the lowest engagement scores in the entire company.
Yeah.
And it costs us a lot of money to recruit and hire all of these people. And they're all talented people. We want them to be here because they want to be, not because they have to be. So it's not good enough for me that you're just bringing us these wins. We need these wins to come from people who want to be here and who want to work here.
Yeah, especially when you start running the numbers on how big your back door is and how many people you're losing and how much it costs. What is it, like 10x or something, an annual salary to go out and find somebody?
And some of those costs are very difficult to measure, but are significant. I mean, I talk about that in my book. What are those costs? There's some significant ones that are very difficult to measure. Like, for example, it's very difficult to measure the survivor's guilt that people have when they survive a layoff.
Oh, wow.
When someone leaves.
Talk more about that.
Yeah, like, right. They didn't get picked to get laid off. So you could say they're one of the lucky ones. However, they don't feel necessarily very lucky. Number one, they're probably having to do more people's work now because there's fewer people around and someone's got to do it. They all, these companies do layoffs, but they don't also cut down on all the work. They leave the work the way it is. And so that causes, basically think of it this way. When those people, those survivors they survived your layoff probably because they're top performers of some kind, right? Potentially. Those top performers are the first ones that have the most opportunities. So those are the ones that are going to leave first, right? And what you end up with are people who just either don't have any other opportunities or just are trying to clock a check and make sure that they keep their job and do the bare minimum. So you end up with these layoffs doing the reverse of thing you think you're doing. You think you're laying off your lowest performers, perhaps, but you're also going to lose your top performers who now suddenly do not feel safe at the company anymore. Job instability is one of the top things that cause people anxiety. It's like the second level of Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Yeah, and it really lacks psychological safety as well.
Mhm.
I love the we're measuring the wrong metrics is what I hear you saying. We're
Yes.
looking at the wrong thing. So what's the flip side of that survivor's guilt? How do we execute those layoffs in such a way as to avoid that instability?
Well, my argument is you don't do the layoff. The most successful companies and the most successful leaders are, see, I just read in the news today, Facebook is
Yeah,
laying off, I don't know, tens, thousands of people, and
yeah,
they
thousands Meta's laying
record
them off.
profits this quarter.
Yeah, and that came on the heels of saying we're no longer going to fact check the way we were. And
Yeah,
of course, that really doesn't pass the political sniff test right now. So,
there's just a
right?
bunch of weird things going on over there,
Yeah.
but it's not unusual, unfortunately, for companies to just be like, yeah, we made record profits this year, but we need to buy back some of our shares, so we need to lay off some of these people and
Yeah.
save some money. I mean, look, it's hard. You should see the look on my face when I have leaders say to me, nobody's loyal to companies anymore. Nobody wants to be loyal, and I just want to go, are
Yeah.
you? What level of cognitive dissonance do you have to have that you can toss people to the curb,
No, man.
make a profit in a quarter, and then expect them to hang on with you? Like loyalty bounces back at you when you send it down your organization, right? It doesn't. It's not something you can buy. It's not something you can demand,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
So, yeah.
That's amazing. You reminded me of one of my clients who is in the mortgage industry, and we all know for the last 5 years, particularly the ups and downs of that. And so couldn't get all the work done because houses were flying off the market as fast as you could get them. Now it's slowed way down. So one of the things they've done is really, up until just recently, done no layoffs. We're finding things for these people to do, whereas they might not have the volume of work they did before. We're investing in our people and these kinds of things. That brand of loyalty, man, is in stark contrast to others in the mortgage industry, even who were laying them off by the tens of thousands, right?
Right. And those people would do anything for that leader.
I'll run through a wall, man.
That's what I'm saying. So if you're a leader out there and you're thinking, how could I get people to do just about anything I want them to do? Well, show them some loyalty and commitment to them, and they will show it back.
And that really equals respect, right? I respect you. You got these great gifts. Want to keep there rather than chasing a short-term goal as opposed to a longer-term goal, right? Because
Yes.
it's hard. Isn't that what it is, Sean? It's a distinction between short and long-term perspectives.
Absolutely. And in fact, if you want to read a whole book about that, you should read The Infinite Game from Simon Sinek. It's one of his best books ever, I think. And he makes this argument way more eloquently than me. I mean, I touch upon it in my book several times, but I continually point back to Simon's book on this topic, because this is what you're saying is the primary reason why companies are doing this wrong.
Yeah, and I don't know. There are other nefarious motivations behind that greed, chasing stock prices and things like that. You talked about 10 traits, if you will, of toxic leaders. What are your top 3 out of those 10? And I know this is like choosing between your children. I get it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they're not. Let's use a different word. They're not traits. They're archetypes, and the archetypes have traits. So I would say that there's
a difference between an archetype and a trait. Then,
traits are like the way you show up. But I have these collections of ways that people show up that end up looking like a certain type, an archetype of leader.
Okay, so the traits group around a
Yes.
certain stack pole and then become an archetype. Okay.
Because some archetypes share the same trait, but it's not. It's expressed differently, right? So, I'll just give you a couple examples, and I think it'll make sense. We already talked about the peacock.
Yep.
Another example would be a chess master. These are probably very common leaders. Chess masters think of leadership as a privilege that they earned and not a responsibility that they have. So they think that they were given their role because they are smarter, better, faster, whatever, something. And so they're better than their employees. and they know more their employees. So when they make big decisions, they tend to go into their, I call it, jump into your cave and make your decision and then pop out and tell everybody what their new life is going to look like. That's treating employees like they're chess pieces on a board.
Okay.
And those are chess masters. So the high performers do not like working for chess masters, because chess masters treat all of their employees as if they're a set of hands for the chess master's brain, right? And people who are high performers don't want to be treated like a set of hands. They want to be hired for their brain.
Not too many knights or rooks then. Most of us are pawns to the chess master.
Yeah, exactly. And if you are meant to feel like a pawn by your leader, then that leader is most likely a chess master. Another type that I think could go on a different extreme would be the invertebrate. The invertebrate is a leader that is very conflict avoidant, who will not challenge a disruptive team member, who will not. They'll never have your back. They'll always back down. They won't defend your team. They don't argue for budget. So they just basically you're just the doormat. Your team is the doormat for your company because your boss is a doormat for you. And on the opposite extreme, actually, I'd like to go to this one here, the data freak, which is one I think is a very interesting one. The data freak, they think they're Neo from the Matrix. They're in a room and every single person is just numbers. There's like a price tag over every person's head, and all we do all day is figure out how to maximize. I joke around in my book that data freaks would measure the amount of productivity loss of you using the restroom if they could get away with it.
And how many sheets of toilet paper you use?
Yeah, I mean, and I don't want to make the statement that data isn't valuable or.
Oh, it's important. Yeah.
Yeah. But
any strength
there are people who are
becomes a liability after a while. So
yes,
you're obsessing over data.
Right. Well, and I would argue that companies that innovate are companies that most companies that are not obsessed about data can innovate to the same conclusion or better faster than a company that's paralyzed until the data tells them to move.
Yeah. That's really interesting. So there seems to be, at least this is anecdotal, observational, but I think it carries data. In my experience anyway, I am constantly amazed by how little training leaders get. And so I'm promoted to a position of leadership because I was really good at building a widget or whatever it is. I'm running numbers or whatever. And so I wind up in this position with very, very, very little training. So my default is to bring the leadership traits that I've observed and that I had. Those can be good, those can be bad.
Right.
But how do we take, or is it even possible to take a bad leader who's poisoning and slowly killing the company? How do we take that person and, I don't want to say reform, but let's just say transform them and help them see that there's a better leadership model and they can do it? Yeah.
Okay. Wow. There's two parts to that answer. First, I just want to make a comment on the problem, which you're absolutely correct about. We are not teaching leadership. And just to put this into perspective, as something that I've been trying to do with my free time when I have some, I've decided to try to volunteer to teach leadership courses in colleges, community colleges, universities.
Oh, wow.
Okay. I can't get anyone to write back to me. I'm almost volunteering to do it.
But it's hilarious.
Yeah, I'm almost volunteering to do it. But the reason why is because I don't have a master's degree in management, which is what they consider to be the thing that a leadership instructor should have. And I'm like, I want to send them a dissertation about the difference between management and leadership in the first place. So we can talk about one of the reasons why we keep having this problem is because we teach people management, but not leadership. Okay. So how do we do this? How do we get someone who's a manager to be a leader? I mean, the way that I think about this, or the way I break it down, is we need to address your mindset about leadership. And mindset comes from three different things. It comes from your beliefs, your values, and your principles. Okay. The three things that make up a mindset about anything. When we do this in a classroom, I usually have students pick a topic that's very common for them or comfortable. Like, what's your mindset about being married, or what's your mindset about driving, right? And we can talk about what are your beliefs about driving, what are your values, and how do they play into the way you drive, right? And then what principles, like principles are the I nevers or I always, those are the ways with which we operate, thou shalt and thou shalt nots kinds of things,
right.
principles, okay? The interesting thing about those three categories is that our behaviors
Yes.
always line up with those, okay? Always, 100%. In fact, we will go through incredible mental gymnastics to make sure that our values, beliefs, and principles line up with our behaviors. Sometimes in hindsight, like we'll help somebody, which is against one of our values, but instead of admitting that we messed up and didn't act as one of our values, we'll justify it. Yeah, well, they deserved it, or they had it coming. We have this a way with which we make our ego okay with our changing the value. So what I tell leaders to do is question their principles, values, and beliefs about leadership. And if we can find some beliefs they hold, I'll give you an example of a belief, just an easy one. There's never a cop around when you need one, is a belief. You might say it in your head. The way with which you behave is an offshoot of that idea, right? Somebody goes speeding by you and there's no cop around, you get confirmation bias. See, there it goes.
Right.
You don't pay attention to the time when someone speeds by and a cop goes woo and goes right after him. That doesn't line up with your belief that there's never a cop around when you need one. So I ask people to identify their values, principles, and beliefs, and then when they challenge those, their behavior changes automatically. We don't even worry about it. Even sociopaths are doing what they believe. Like serial killers are doing what they believe is the correct thing. I'm not saying that serial killers are right. I'm saying
they've convinced themselves they are. Though.
Yes, they are doing what aligns with their values, principles, and beliefs.
So what happens when I get promoted without this training to question, right, my values, my beliefs, and my principles? And so I'm just passing on what I received before, but then I try to justify that when you confront me with my behavior, because that's where the ultimate litmus test is.
Yeah.
When I'm in the wild, right, and I'm leading, and then you say to me, "Hey, Dr. Joey, I thought you said this, that you respect all people." That was not a very respectful conversation you had with Sean there.
Yeah. I actually start higher. Usually I get engagement scores from the team. And I come back to them and say, so how's your leadership? And they'll rate your leadership to me, your own leadership to me on a scale of 1 to 10. And they'll say, oh, usually those people think they're doing a pretty good job. Like 7, something like that. Well, your employees are miserable. Here are the scores.
But that doesn't fit the construct they have mentally.
But the output, see, here's what I'm saying. The outcome of a leader is that you have people following you. If people are not following you, you're not a leader. You're just in charge, right? Yeah. A job title doesn't mean you're a leader. I don't care if it's in your title or not. You can be the vice president of blah, 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 and not have a single follower, not one person who wants to follow you anywhere. So the question is, do you want to be someone who isn't responsible for people, who are doing what you're telling them to do because you're the boss? Or do you want them to be doing what you want them to do because you're a leader and they respect you, right? Most of those people will tell you I want them to do it because they respect me. And then I show the engagement score and say they don't. Yeah. And so the question is, you and I can either have a conversation about what it is you're doing that is making this score low, or we can pretend that they're all wrong and that you actually are a great leader and they just don't know how to spot one. Which do you think is more likely?
Well, it depends on how much you got me boxed in a corner and how much I have to CYA. Well, and is my leadership style one of compliance? And I just want compliance, and I don't care how engaged they are. Just go get it done.
Yep. And that's not a leader. That's a manager, which absolutely. Is, that's who you want to be. Great. But don't call yourself a leader with that mindset. And
I see this so much today, Sean, and I'm sure you do too, because we've got in so many companies now 4 generations. And the baby boomers, my age, they don't want to figure out how to work with Gen Zs or millennials.
Right.
They just have that belief that you can't find people to work today, or nobody wants to work today. You can't find good people, things like that. So it becomes an echo chamber for them, as opposed to looking at the engagement scores, having conversations that connect with people from different generations, and just finding out what they're after from work.
Right. Exactly. I mean, and unfortunately, we do have a generational problem here because, but here's the thing I tell boomers I'm talking to, right? I'm not a boomer. I'm Gen X, but I'm right almost there.
You're a geriatric Gen X.
I'm right at the end of the Gen X. But,
Well, I'm a pediatric boomer, so we can go with that. My wife says I'm a big kid, so.
what I tell boomers is that the art of leading people hasn't changed since 1950, right? We have known since 1950 what motivates human beings. The idea of theory X and theory Y leadership, which is very command and control or empowering and trusting, that was around since like 1960, 1950, I don't know, 1953. I can't remember the year, but it's way back. Back when boomers were kids. Okay. Yeah. So this isn't like some new hippy dippy Gen Z thing.
It's not woo woo, right? Is it?
No. All that we changed from times that boomers were working in their time and now is that there's more awareness now of because we can share the experiences across multiple companies. We have social media. We have websites like Glassdoor where people can post experiences with their companies, with their bosses.
The bad and the ugly.
Believe me, I could talk to my dad, who's a boomer, for days, and he would tell me all kinds of terrible stories about leaders he had.
Oh, okay. Sure.
It's the same stories that Gen Z are saying now. Just the difference is that Gen Z doesn't want to put up with it.
Yeah, and kudos to them because they've seen the effect of that bad leadership on boomers. The highest divorce rate, the highest addiction rate of any of those previous generations.
Listen, I pointed this out to somebody for the Wall Street Journal one time. There are three. The Gen Z is the first generation that can sit at the Thanksgiving table with three generations of elders who will all tell them stories of times their company screwed them over. Where they got laid off just to make a number after 20 years of experience with the company, like where they literally are being shown by three generations of elders at the Thanksgiving table that companies don't care about them. We're expecting these Gen Z people to enter into the workforce and be like, I'm all here for you.
Yeah, not so much. All right. Shawn Limsom is my most excellent guest on this episode of the Work Positive Podcast. Hey, we're going to tell you a little bit more in a minute, but unless you're on the Peloton or walking your dog or something, go to motivatedoutcomes.com right now. You can do it. Motivatedoutcomes.com. Just shuffle over there and check out the website. We'll tell you a little bit more and how Shawn has a special deal for Work Positive Nation to get that One Drop of Poison book. So with that in mind, then, what should we expect from Gen Z except what we're getting, right? So they see and hear those horror stories. I mean, they see the cumulative effect on those three previous generations. They hear the horror stories. Their scars are evident. So is it any wonder that they don't expect different criteria? So let's say that our company has a healthy culture, and we can talk about what that looks like. But a Gen Zer would expect a coach. I think everybody should have a coach, but anyway, that's just me. Would expect a coach. So let's say then that I'm working my way up through leadership. How do I communicate that? Our leadership is different around here, and here are the distinctives of it. How do I communicate that when I'm attracting top talent?
If we have a healthy culture and we're doing it right,
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So that would be very rare, but let's assume that
we're talking about unicorns. I get it.
Yeah. But it's okay. Let's fine.
Yeah,
let's do that.
We gotta have a goal to shoot for, man.
Sure. So first, I break culture down into 10 components, and I'll just quickly go just name them off. They're not like mystery words. Organizational stability is first. Political safety second. Purpose, the company's purpose, my team's purpose. Credibility, do I have credibility with you? Do you have it with me? Autonomy, engagement, morale, loyalty, communication, and what I call challenge stress, meaning like you're asking me to do something that feels like a challenge, not something that feels impossible. Okay. If I have all those things and I'm doing all those things well, then I can claim that I have a healthy culture. And I think that any company that has a healthy culture should be able to point to any candidate and name off how they're good in all 10 of those areas. And honestly, if I walked up to a company and they had that culture and I got the job, I would feel lucky to get it and probably would never leave, which is why loyalty is on that list.
Absolutely. Yeah. And man, a certain amount of vulnerability around here are 10 metrics for a healthy culture. We're doing really good in these 5.
Yes.
These 3, we're mediocre. Man, we need some help in these 2. So I just want to be honest with you and talk about that. That part of that vulnerability and communication.
That's right.
Helps build that loyalty, right?
Yeah. And one of the mistakes that people make when they're working on changing the culture of their company is they take pot shots at those 10 things. Like they just pick one. So first of all, they probably don't even think about them as being all 10, right? They just think of it as 1 or 2 of them and that's their culture, but there's actually 10. And in my model, and I think I'm pretty proud of this model because I think I've run it past quite a few people and we think we're onto something here. That it's not just that you have these 10, but they are in the order I gave them to you from bottom to top. And meaning that it doesn't really matter if you're taking, if you have credibility, if your organization is unstable, if people are operating on Maslow's second level because they don't know if they're going to have a job tomorrow or if they're going to get reorged again for the 12th time this year or whatever thing, you can't make the work stable or the workplace stable, then it's going to be very difficult for you to do all the stuff above it. Yeah. Right. And so really, if you worked from the bottom to the top, and I want to make this one quick point here, the bottom 3, organizational stability, political safety, and purpose come from the executives at the company. And the remaining 7 can come from any leader at the company. Anyone who has direct reports can take those last 7 on.
That's amazing. So Sean Limsom is my guest on this episode of the Work Positive Podcast. Work Positive Nation, look down in the show notes. You're going to see Sean's LinkedIn URL. Be sure to click that, go in, connect with him, send him a message, tell him how much you enjoyed listening to him on the Work Positive Podcast and other podcasts. I mean, dude, you've been on a bunch of them. And just ask a question right there if you want to. Now, Sean, when Work Positive Nation goes to motivatedoutcomes.com, you told me you got a special deal on your book, One Drop of Poison. Share that with us, please.
Yeah, so I don't know, I could write a whole book just about writing books.
Well, some people have.
I'm self-published, and what that means is that when you go to a printer, and then that printer basically gets your book available on Amazon. Sure. Amazon has, and a bunch of bookstores. So you can buy my book anywhere you want, right? You can go to Amazon. Any place books are sold, it's in the system. Okay. So you're welcome to do it that way. But if you want to save some money and buy the book cheaper, I get a little more of a cut also. So it's kind of a win-win. I get more money than Amazon would give me if you bought it through them. And you get to save like $10 off the price Amazon's selling the book for. So to get that deal, you just basically go to motivatedoutcomes.com, and the very first little slider pop-up that comes up that says One Drop of Poison is now available, you can just click buy now and it will take you to that link. And when you buy it from them, you're basically buying it directly from the printer. So it'll be printed and sent right to you.
Nice. We're supporting business people here directly.
And we're cutting out Bezos, so we can't launch any more spaceship.
but like that super yacht requires a lot of diesel fuel, so we still need to buy some stuff from Amazon. I love it. So motivatedoutcomes.com, and that's in the show notes right there. Sean Limsom, Work Positive Nation, always wants to know from my guest about their one thing. So Sean Limsom, what's one thing you would encourage Work Positive Nation to do today to start creating the kind of positive, healthy work culture that we've talked about?
I would think the one thing you should do, if you're not doing it, is start to measure engagement at your company. Measure the engagement of, if it's not for your company, measure it for your team. 2 things I look for if they're going to self-administer this, two things. One is look for people who give you perfect scores. That's a big red flag. Okay. So if you're getting fantastic 10s on your engagement, I would start to question it.
Yeah, the organizational stability is not real good.
I would say the psychology is not that great. If you're, there might be a safety issue there. And the second thing would be no engagement on the employee engagement survey. People not participating is like a 0 on that score. Okay, so those are the two things. But if you don't make yourself aware of the engagement, you can't begin to address it. You can walk around in a fuzz thinking that you are a perfect leader when in fact nobody is looking at you as a leader at all.
Man, great words of wisdom there. Thank you so much. Shawn Limsom is my guest on this episode of the Work Positive Podcast. Go to motivatedoutcomes.com right now. Pick up your copy of One Drop of Poison. Add your stories. Go on to Shawn's stories. Go to LinkedIn and connect with him and send him a message there about your bad leader and the poison and the effect on the company. Also, lots of great tips in the book about how you can move towards a healthier culture. Shawn, thanks so much, man. I've learned a ton. I'm better for the conversation today. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom.
Thanks for having me, Dr. Joey. I appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Work Positive Podcast. Please share this podcast with your friends who are HR and small business leaders so they can do one thing today to create a positive work culture that increases productivity and profits. I'd like to give you a free Work Positive course just for listening. It's called Something to Talk About, and it's transformed the work conversations of so many people all over the world. Get your free copy when you go to workpositive.today/something to talk about, and you can start transforming your conversations today. Remember, it pays to work positive.